96.3 FM WZBC. Today, as you may have heard, there is a massive protest going on in Europe over the meeting of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. That organization formed in the Cold War, which now continues to operate as a treaty organization, developing strategic alliances and weapons agreements, really, among various countries. There is a protest in the streets saying no to NATO as we speak. It's interesting because in this hour of Sounds of Dissent, we will also speak with longtime arms and defense scholar and writer Karl Konetta. He's the co-director of the Project on Defense Alternatives. We'll ask him later in the hour about the military budget of the United States. Is its huge, gleaming expense to be untouchable forever, and particularly in this economy? $700 billion a year, billions and billions projected to be spent on the war in Afghanistan in the decades to come. We'll take a look all at that coming up later in the program. But right now we're on the line directly to Reiner Braun. He is the executive director of International Lawyers Against Nuclear Arms and the co-chair of the No to NATO Alliance, one of the major organizers of the protest happening right now at the NATO meetings. Thank you so much for joining us, Reiner Braun. You're there in the streets, are you?
Yes, we are on the street on the demonstration. We are more than 20,000 people demonstrating through the city of Lisbon, and it's a huge demonstration with very much peace flags and a good impression to show our peace attitude.
Reiner Braun, tell me, why is it that you and so many people with No to NATO have focused on NATO in particular as something to demonstrate against at this time in history?
You know, I think the arguments are very easy. The first argument is NATO is war, not only in Afghanistan, but look to the history. NATO was making these war against international law in Yugoslavia, and NATO is preparing more interventional wars. This is the part of the new NATO strategy. NATO is the modernizing of nuclear weapons, and you know, I think after the acceptance of the strategy yesterday night, we can really say the dream of Obama is over. There's nothing mentioned any longer for a nuclear weapons-free world. There's only mention that NATO should prepare the conditions for a nuclear weapons-free world, which means they could do everything or nothing for abolishing our nuclear weapons. Then there's this new missile defense program, which is extremely expensive. The start money for Europe is about 200 million euros only for the preparation, without installation and without developing these new weapons. So these are some reasons that we are against these alliances. You know, there is really no need for these alliances. It was a child of the Cold War. The Cold War is over, so we really should overcome NATO.
Is not the current global war on terrorism, as is known, and Europe's own struggles with terrorism something that NATO handles?
You know, I think you can't overcome what they are calling war on terror with military purposes. What do you want to do? You need a police engagement, you need civil contact, and you need above all the development of the poor countries, that there is no reserves for the new terrorists of the 21st century. The terrorists were born because they are poor, they have no future, they have no education, and because of the attacks of the United States. You know, the U.S. is producing any day more terrorists than they can kill by their behavior all around the world. So let us reduce the military budget, using the money for education, for overcome the crisis, for healthcare and social affairs, and the world will be much more peaceful than it is.
So NATO's primary role is missile defense, it seems, in Europe. Is this not something that Europeans and the many people gathered there in Lisbon support in this day and age?
You know, I think the majority of the people all over the European countries absolutely against missile defense systems. Up to now, also the majority of the governments were against it, and it is now part of a compromise to have it in. But we don't need this. For what we need this? The rockets from Iran, they are not developed. They are not developed, and they are not built. And to destroy Iran, we have the U.S. submarines lying in the sea before Iran. So there is really no need. The only need I see for the missile defense system, that is a huge system for the U.S. military-industrial complex to earn even more money than it earns now. But there is really no other need for it, and we will fight against it all the next years. Our new slogan is no penny for missile defense system.
Not a penny for a missile defense system. What do you think the European governments, including Germany, where you're from, see themselves invested for this missile defense? Over 200 million euros, as you say, being discussed to continue this kind of posture between Europe, Eastern Europe, Russia, and perhaps Iran.
Let me say one sentence to Russia. We are for stronger context to Russia, for stronger economic, political, social, democratic, human rights context. But, you know, the new development of Russia will be not on the top of tanks and missiles and rockets. So we need quite a lot of more context to Russia, but not military development. Again, also in the military spending in Russia has to be paid by the people of the country. And we have a huge economic crisis in Russia too. So who should pay for that? There's really no sense to develop these missile defense systems even together with Russia. And, you know, the second point is Europe needs cooperation. Europe has not enough resources for the development of the industry in the future. But these resources cannot be secured by military. The other countries will not allow this any longer. So we need other, more peaceful, fair trade contacts to these countries. So for that, we definitely need not NATO, because NATO is a military alliance which is not helpful for solving civilian problems.
So, Voice of America, one of the public media outlets that is funded by the U.S. government and often carrying news, usually directed towards Europe, is reporting that the NATO chief Rasmussen says that the meeting today with NATO leaders and the Russian President Medvedev is a turning point in relations between Moscow and NATO, seen as a Western alliance. The head of NATO announces Russia has agreed to expand the transit of equipment through Russia to support NATO troops in Afghanistan. What is Europe's, the sense in Europe about the role of Russia in Afghanistan, but also Turkey and the role it plays as a pass-through point for weapons or attacks by the United States and the NATO alliance?
Let me first say, turning point to Russia. We hear this all the 5 years. After 5 years, we have again a turning point, and at the end, we have the old, not very easy relations in Europe and Russia. So I'm a little bit more cautious. Rasmussen is a hero. He takes all the big words all the time in his mouth, and at the end, there comes out a small cat or a mouse. So I'm really much more cautious what he will think about historical development. I can't see any historical development by these summits. This is a summit of compromise. They negotiate about these documents just to the last minute, and they find words of compromises. We will see what happens with these documents in reality. It's a document of compromises, and it is nothing but a historical document. Second, again, to Russia. You know, the development of relations to Russia can only be on a civilian way. And that the Russians are supporting the U.S. activities and the NATO activities in Afghanistan, the reason is very easy. They are looking for our Western money for modernizing their country. They believe that they could modernize their country by sailing with oil and gas. But this time is really over because of the economic crisis. The prices for oil and gas reduced for Europe. So they need a lot of money, and they hope to get this money from Western Europe. And for that, they accept the military engagement of the Western countries in Europe, in Afghanistan, and even allow them to transport the food and also some military purposes through their country. And the third point, why they are a little bit positive to the NATO and Afghanistan, is that they are in fear of the Muslim development in the south of their own countries. You know, in their own country, the Muslims in the south of Russia and in the former Soviet Union republics are suffering. These are poor countries with a majority of very, very poor and suffering people. And they